The big one is fast approaching. Arsenal against Manchester City at the Etihad, and they've just got one more day to prepare. And the mind games are already underway. We're going to talk about all that and more in today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for doing so. Thank you for joining me. It is incredibly appreciated. Again, apologies if my voice, if my sniffling, if the need for a glass of water is in any way distracting throughout the show. Still not 100% just quite yet. But we are on the mend and gradually improving. So thank you for that. We are, however, in with a bit of a task today. Because yesterday we just again finished slightly short. It's very common for our match reaction shows after the games that we fail to win. The mood is low, the frustrations are high. I get it. I understand. I'm not going to get annoyed, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you very kindly to hop over to yesterday's show as well as I usually do. Just make sure you've pressed that like button if you haven't done so already. Help us to just get that little extra 100 likes or so over to that 1K barrier. We want to keep this run going. But importantly, we can't forget about today's show as well. Make sure that you're dropping a like on today. And if you're listening on audio platforms, we need you to hop over to YouTube and to make sure you're dropping likes on not only today's, but yesterday's show. So if you're one of the people I'm talking about, you know who you are. Good morning to those in the chat box. I appreciate you all being here. Our Silky Black Shine or the Relay Peter. We've got John and Glenn, Tom, Angela, Damien, Stevie, Matt G, Amira, Brad, Rancid, Carlton, Paul, we've got Franklin and Rob, we've got Edison and Jose and Temi and Rich and Maximius. Good morning to you all. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me. It is incredibly appreciated. I did want to discuss something with you as well. I've noticed recently, I don't know quite why, but obviously we stream these shows not only to YouTube, but we stream them to Twitter as well. And I've noticed that for some reason, after the shows have gone live on social media, they don't stay there. I don't know if Twitter's changed its policies stringently about streaming on Twitter, but I don't really know. So if you are a Twitter listener, it has never been more important to make sure that you're tuning in on YouTube. So just a heads up on that. Not quite sure what's going on in there at all. Not too many stories to talk about today. Of course, it is just such a short turnaround time from the game against Atalanta on Thursday night. However, early on Friday morning, Mikel Arteta conducted a mini pre-Man City press conference with a select few of the press. He was asked a number of questions, which we're going to go through this morning, which he gave updates on injuries and also on his thoughts ahead of Manchester City. He was asked about the mood returning from the game against Atalanta, and he said it's very good. We have played two very competitive matches away from home in the last 4 or 5 days, and we have a massive one again on Sunday. So we're looking forward to it. Asked about any fresh injury concerns, he said not really. Straight after the Atalanta match, we need to recover, sleep, eat well, and everyone is looking forward to the match. We know what it means, we know what we're fighting for, and it's a great opportunity for the team to show what we're capable of. And he was asked for an update on Martin Odegaard, to which he said, again, we need to see the development in the next week or so, how the ankle reacts, first of all, and then the staff will give me an update on the time frame and how long he will be out. So again, this is very normal. We're kind of waiting for the swelling to decrease enough so that we can see the kind of the significant damage that he's alluded to in more detail, so we can get more of an interest, more of a detailed response regarding a timeline for Martin Odegaard. So I hope that it's not longer than a few months. I hope it's not longer than a couple of months. But there is said to be significant damage and there's said to be ligament issues, which, of course, are always delicate to try and deal with. And so hopefully it's a quick recovery. But at the moment, we're still awaiting more clarity on this one. He was asked about the extra day that Man City have in terms of their recovery. And he says, we wanted the same as them. We're not getting it. So we have to adapt to make the most of the time that we have today and tomorrow and on the morning of the match to prepare in the best way to go there and win the game. Now, Arsenal would have had a recovery day yesterday. They will be expected to do some training today, but it is incredibly short amount of time between matches to have 2 days, Friday and Saturday, to prepare for Arsenal's toughest and arguably most important away game of the entire season it is really frustrating that the fixture schedule has created a real obstacle for Arteta, and it does put Arsenal at a slight disadvantage when it comes to the game on Sunday. Yes, it's the start of the season, so players, you'd argue are at their fittest, but it doesn't take away the extra days preparation and extra days recovery that Man City's players have had that Arsenal simply haven't, and that's just a reality that Arsenal are going to have to deal with when it comes to the game on Sunday. He was asked about the potential of Kevin De Bruyne not being there, and he says no, because they have the option if he doesn't play for Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden, Kovacic. They're all world-class players, Arteta says, and we have a few missing as well, and we have to adapt. But certainly those kinds of teams don't rely on one individual, which is extremely important for them. And just sticking with the De Bruyne story as well, Pep Guardiola spoke yesterday in a bit more detail, if you like, about De Bruyne. And actually, Pep Guardiola did not rule out the potential for De Bruyne to play in the game against Arsenal. He says Kevin De Bruyne feels today a little bit better, but not yet. He could be involved against Arsenal. Days off and tomorrow is training. We will see. So it's not completely ruled out, as some have suggested. Some reports, of course, coming out yesterday claimed that he will miss the game. Whereas Pep, it seems, is being a little bit more coy when it comes to ruling out his best midfield option in the team, of course. I think it would be slightly surprising if De Bruyne is indeed involved. And I think that what we can put these words down to is the classic Pep Guardiola mind games. And actually, Guardiola was speaking about mind games and was asked about mind games, to which he said that he doesn't know how to play them, which in itself is a mind game. It's going all football press conference inception right now, with how the managers are talking about these things, that they don't want to rule out players. We heard it from Arteta ahead of the Spurs game with Ødegaard, of course. He was like, he's always willing, he always wants to play, when always he was not going to be involved. And it's just a very normal part of the game. So I'd be surprised if De Bruyne was involved, but never say never. He also said about Arsenal that year by year, Arsenal get better. It's because they invest a lot in a deep squad. The depth of the squad, adding more players, top quality. If I say something, they will say I'm playing mind games or something like that, but I have high opinion about them. Guardiola can never, ever stop talking about the amount of money that other teams and other clubs spend. He is obsessed with the chat of how much Arsenal or Liverpool or these other teams have spent. When in the reality, ever since Pep Guardiola came in, I think only Chelsea have spent more than Manchester City since Pep Guardiola arrived in the Premier League. No other team has spent as much as his Manchester City team have done. And no other team, of course, had the foundations and the bedrock of the squad that he inherited when he took over. No one else inherited a Kevin De Bruyne. No one else inherited a Sergio Aguero when Pep Guardiola took over. Some of the players, Vincent Kompany, of course, as well. Like, no other team has spent as much as Pep has in the same amount of time, that had the foundation and had the players that he had access to when, of course, he took over. But you see him and you see rival fans of Arsenal trying to point out how much Arteta has spent during the time that he's been manager. They always try and talk about it in kind of individual terms, that Arteta spent this much, but he's only picked up an FA Cup. And you're like, right, okay, if you want to talk about how much individuals have spent, that's fine, but you're looking a little bit silly because you're not taking into account what the competition has also spent and what the competition also had prior to those managers, of course, and prior to Arteta taking over at Arsenal, which is always an important factor and an important bit of context that people like to leave out because it suits the agenda, of course, that they like to just spew across your timelines effectively. But yes, Guardiola, I think, here playing some of his mind games. Now, I can't promise that there'll be a preview show again. I have to apologise. My ability to do preview shows has been really compromised this week. It will become very clear why that is the case at the start of next week. And I'll make that clear in tomorrow morning's show as well. But do accept my apologies for the lack of preview shows. It will be changing as of ahead of the Leicester City game, particularly. Probably not for the Bolton game, because there's still going to be a lot of chaos going on. But most likely for the Leicester game, that will change, and we'll have, again, the preview shows back and ready to deliver you all of the insight and chat ahead of these games as well. In terms of just giving you a bit of an insight into what I would go for this game, Martinelli has been an interesting discussion point over the last two fixtures, and I personally have gone back and forth regarding Martinelli's confidence, his delivery, his execution, his form. And it's not been the best, of course. I would say that I've done a little bit more digging into his performance, of course, and Bukayo Saka arguably had a worse game, actually, against Atalanta than Martinelli did. And I don't think that's necessarily been focused on enough. I've seen, obviously, Scott Willis is a great account to follow on social media to get kind of the statistical insight, if you like, on different players. And he did a little bit of a deep dive on Martinelli's comparison to Saka. He tweeted saying there has been a lot of hand-wringing and talk about Martinelli, and I get it. His finishing is in the dumps. He was also the most threatening player on the night and the best of the forwards. Saka had a stinker for his expectation, and it has gone pretty unnoticed. 2 weak outside of the box shots and no chances created. Couldn't really beat Kolasinac at all on the night. Martinelli had the memorable big issues, but Saka was kind of invisible here to not even have the chances to miss. And I think that's fair. I think maybe Bukayo Saka is being given a little bit more of a free ride in comparison to Martinelli in those games because Martinelli had the chance. That said, I think if Ødegaard was available, I still wouldn't start Martinelli. I'd start Trossard in this game. But because Ødegaard isn't available, I think we don't really have much of a choice. You could argue that Sterling should play, and I did actually talk about that yesterday a bit. But in reflection, I think having Martinelli's work rate, having his defensive ability at Man City is probably going to be, in this particular game, more of an asset. If it was next week and we were talking about Leicester at home, of course I'd be more keen to play Trossard. Of course I'd be more keen to experiment. But I think because it's Man City, I think Martinelli is going to be the better choice because of his work rate, because of the defensive cover that he brings. And Arsenal aren't going to play a defensive game. Fans may not want to see that. Fans may want us to try and go for Man City. Those fans are wrong. Okay? Just in the bluntest sense of the word, those fans are wrong. Arsenal going to Man City, trying to play Man City their own game is going to be difficult. The only time that we will need to attack really of a consistent nature is if we concede early. Otherwise, we're going to be playing a counter-attacking game. It's the only way I see Arsenal coming away with a result in this fixture at the moment, away from home, without Ødegaard, without Merino, without some other key players. The only way we're getting a result at Man City is by playing the same way we played at Spurs, on the counter, defensively, and with Arteta getting compared to Stoke City. And by the way, you've probably seen this by rival fans, all this stick that Arsenal are getting about the way in which they're playing, the lack of attacking verve, the more defensive mindset in these games. And what I find is so funny about this kind of rhetoric around Arsenal is that Arsenal have had the trickiest start of any of the top 5 teams. Away to Villa, away to Spurs, away to City in the first 5 Premier League games, away to Atalanta, a side whose attacking numbers are ridiculous, and we kept them under 0.3 XG on Thursday night, which is unheard of for this Atalanta side. Arsenal have been playing the way that they've been playing because they are tactically aware, because they're smart, and because they've ended up being unbeaten in these first 5 games of the season, winning 3 of them, 2, of course, being big 6 or top 6 sides away from home in the Premier League as well. So I find it really odd. I don't really find it surprising, but I find it odd that Arsenal fans and other fans of rival clubs are taking the opportunity to bash Arsenal's style at the start of the season, considering the players they're missing and considering the fact they've gone up against some teams of which, if they'd have approached in a more attacking, exciting, flary way, they would have been far more exposed and far more likely to drop points in those games, considering the players that we had, of course, available to us. So I'm fine with how Arsenal are playing. Of course, if it continues against the likes of Leicester and Southampton and Bournemouth that we've got coming up in the weeks to come, then we can have more of a conversation about it. But when we go away from home against Villa and Spurs and then, of course, Man City, and we're playing slightly more defensively, I'm not going to have too many complaints about it. It's when we get into those games against the teams that we should be dominating that I'll be a little bit more concerned, of course, if we are in a situation where we're defending deep and trying to hit Leicester on the counter. Then we can have a conversation. But against Man City, Spurs and Villa, I'm not as convinced that I need to be all that concerned about it, to be honest with you. Like I don't need to be concerned about whether my data is safe online because I use NordVPN, of course, which is the #1 VPN service on the network that you can get a significant discount for by going to nordvpn.com/Gooner to get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan with 4 months extra thrown in free on top of that, of course, as well. Not only that, but I'm safe in the knowledge that I can change my geolocation on my phone, my tablet, or indeed my laptop too. So if I'm hopping around the world, going to watch Arsenal and Atalanta, for instance, in Bergamo, northern Italy, and I want to watch the highlights maybe on TNT Sports, for instance, which you can't do while you're abroad, but you can do if you've got a VPN because it makes your phone think it's back in the UK digitally, and I just turn it on And hey presto, I've got myself the highlights that I wanted to watch that wouldn't usually be available to me in a foreign nation, of course, that is supported by NordVPN. Link down in the description. The 30-day money-back guarantee is available for those of you that would like to access that. Who can say any fairer whatsoever? Well, you could be in with a chance of winning a fantastic Arsenal prize, of course. This was the previous prize on offer to you. It was, of course, the signed and framed Ben White and Calafiori shirt that was on offer as well. And I can tell you that there are less than a sixth of these tickets now left. It might even be by the time you get there, they're gone. So do not waste the opportunity. Do not miss the chance of potentially winning some fantastic memorabilia that will make you so much of, you'll just get so much jealousy and envy from your friends if you land these prizes. And we've had a great record here at TGT of our listeners winning them. Best of luck to you all. Link down in the description. Go onto the competitions page, go and find the prize and go and give it an enter. UK only as usual. Right, let's go to part two and your questions right after this. Okay. I am again apologizing because I'm feeling like that took a lot of energy, that ad reel. And I can feel like the illness is still creeping up on me slowly. So I can't promise we'll be here for a long time in this part two, especially not an hour and 15 minutes like we were in yesterday's show. Thank you to our callers on yesterday's show. I hope that you enjoyed the phone-in aspect of it. If you could still, as I said at the start of the show, hop over back to yesterday's show. If you didn't do so already, please drop a like there because we are close, but we didn't quite reach our 1,000 likes. And I want to keep that momentum going up into this game against Man City. We can't lose it. So make sure you're dropping a like here. Make sure you're dropping a like there. And make sure you're subscribing as well because we are closing in very close. You know, we're 132, 131 now away from 60,000 subs. So thank you for that. It is incredibly appreciated. Indeed. Right. Fuad says, my worries, Tom, is the lack of creativity in the middle of the pitch that we have after Vieira left, which I was okay with. But we've left ourselves short in that department. Now Ødegaard is out. So obviously Arsenal haven't had Ødegaard in the last game against Spurs. Manchester City have been reliant upon Erling Haaland. I want to ask you a question. Now, if you're on our Discord server, you'll know the answer to this already and you may even have heard it on yesterday's show. How many big chances in Premier League games this season, in terms of big chances created, how many big chances created do you think we're behind Manchester City at this point? Just give me a number. Throw a number into the chat box. How many big chances less than Manchester City so far in the first 4 Premier League games of the campaign do you think we've created compared to them? That's what I want to know. I mean, the same answer would be how many more big chances have Manchester City, of course, created in comparison to us this season would be a good question. For those that are worried, of course, I mean, about the Arsenal creativity at this stage and that Arsenal are playing like Stoke right now and that we're too defensive, you know, for the perspective of that, how many big chances less than Manchester City do you think we have created so far? John says 5. Temi says 50. Mohammed says 6. Arasilki says 5. Niall says 10. Thankfully, and I think for those of you that listened to yesterday's show, you'll already know the answer. And I think some of you have. The answer is 1. Stu says 1. Fuad says run. Wonton Soup says 1. Rob says 1 because I told you yesterday. And if you were listening and you knew the answer to this question already, of course you'll be in with that. So for those that are leaving other answers, perhaps you'll be a little bit surprised that Arsenal have only created 1 less big chance this season in the Premier League so far compared to Manchester City. And that, I think, highlights the reality and perhaps the overreaction of some of our fans so far this campaign. Last season, for instance, after 38 games, it was just 11. Man City created 11 more big chances across 38 games compared to Arsenal. And that ended up maybe being part of the 2-point difference. For me, it wasn't. You know, Arsenal, it was more about our finishing, actually. I think if we'd have taken our chances against West Ham, taken our chances against Fulham, taken our chances against Villa, we'd be sitting here as Premier League champions right now, not because of how many big chances we created. The lack of Ødegaard is going to hurt us. That is, and it's going to be a talking point, I know, in the coming weeks and months, depending on how long he is out for. And people will point to Vieira, who, by the way, is, of course, injured right now for Porto. And people will point to the fact that we didn't maybe do the business that they wanted us to do. Some people say we should have signed Eze, despite the fact, of course, that he sits in the 50-something percentile for assists last season. I think ultimately we're in a position where there wasn't, for me anyway, the profile to go and sign in the summer that was going to give us the close quality to Erdegaard. And if you're Eze, you want to go into these teams and take that step up that Elise has taken. Elise has gone to Bayern and he's starting. Eze doesn't start for Arsenal right now, nor is Eze more of a creative player than he is more of a goal-scoring midfielder. He's much more of a goal-scoring midfield type than the creative type. The reality is, if you lose Erdegaard, you're losing your best creative force. You're losing perhaps the best creative force in the Premier League right now. It's not like Arsenal don't have creative players. You know, Trossard can create, Havertz can create, Saka can create, White can create, Declan Rice can create. In fact, Declan Rice created more big chances in the Premier League last season than Eberechi Eze, for instance, to give you a bit of an example of what this is about. So I'm struggling here, as I was yesterday, to kind of understand that rhetoric. And I think that from an Arsenal perspective, until we get into the games against the Leicesters, the Bournemouths, and, you know, these types of games, that's when I'll start worrying about the creativity. You know, that's when I'll start worrying about the fact that we're not creating as much as we need to. But right now, it's not necessarily as much of a concern at the moment. Did I say as they starts for Palace? Sorry, I meant Palace. You know what I meant. You know what I meant. I didn't include this next section, which I'm going to come on to now, in part one. I don't know why I didn't include it in part one, because it is actually Arsenal related. It's more of a British politics thing, and I know that people don't really like talking about politics and football. This one does actually relate specifically to Arsenal, and I'm actually curious about your thoughts on it. I don't want to get like all toxic and political about this. But obviously, this is a story that relates very specifically to Arsenal, and I want to check like your thoughts on if you're bothered by it. Now, let me read you the story. Okay, so the story is, and I read this directly from the BBC News website. So Sir Keir Starmer, who is the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, of course, having been elected this year and changed the political party structure of the UK that has been in place for the last 13 years. The story goes, Sir Keir Starmer has defended his decision to accept corporate hospitality from Arsenal Football Club, arguing he can no longer use his normal seats as Prime Minister. The Premier League club has made 2 seats available to Sir Keir Starmer, a season ticket holder, in the corporate area of the Emirates Stadium. In interviews with BBC regional political editors, he said that he had been advised it would cost the taxpayer more money in security costs to use his normal seat. He added that he would rather be in the stands, but that accepted a corporate ticket was a perfectly sensible argument. It comes amid recent scrutiny of gifts received by both the Prime Minister and the wife, Victoria, including clothes gifted to her by a Labour donor. So what I want to ask you about this is do you care? That's what I want to ask, because a lot of people do. So I'm going to type this poll into the chat box. Of course, if you're not based in the UK, it's maybe trickier for you to answer this question because you're not, really affected by this in any way, I suppose. But do you care, or would you care? So I'll put would in brackets. So just like hypothetically, if you were a UK resident or a UK part of the UK electorate, I'm just asking, or would you care if the Prime Minister, who is not of course able to sit in his usual, because for those that don't know, so Keir Starmer has a season ticket and went as leader of the opposition when he wasn't the Prime Minister. He went and sat in the Emirates with his friends. But as Prime Minister, you can't do that because you're Prime Minister. You have a security detail. You have a lot more threats, of course, hypothetically toward you. So, and he wants to go and watch Arsenal games because he's a fan, and he would do anyway as leader of the opposition, and that hasn't changed going into his tenure as Prime Minister. So, yeah, do you care if the Prime Minister is offered and takes 2 corporate, if that's the right way of spelling it, yes, corporate seats at the Emirates Stadium? Like, do you care? Is what I'm asking you. Like, does it affect you in any way? Would it affect how you'd think of him or voting for him? It's a really interesting story that's perpetuated through English media and UK media the last kind of couple of days. I've been listening to a lot of stories about it, listened to a lot of radio talk about it as well. And I'm just kind of curious because, and I won't give you my view on it just yet, because usually what ends up happening is I give my view and then it affects the poll. People wait for my opinion and then vote on it based on that, because you don't want to necessarily align differently. Some people don't care about that, which I respect entirely. So if you don't care, vote, of course, no. If you do care, leave yes. And if you do care as well, tell me why in the chat box. I'm really curious as to your reasons. And for those of you that are wondering why we're talking about this, this is, of course, the Arsenal news show. This is a big story in the UK at the moment, and it relates specifically to Arsenal Football Club. That's why we're talking about it. So don't leave all the keep politics out of football. This is a direct story relating to Arsenal. So I'm just very much curious of what your thoughts are. I need to check how much the box is. I thought that's probably a good question that people may have. How much is the box that he would be, or rather the seats? I'm curious as to what it was. Okay, let's go on to the Guardian's article on it. So this was from yesterday. So Kistammer is facing questions about whether his £35,000 of free tickets from football clubs risks a huge conflict of interest as his government prepares to bring in a new regulatory opposed by the industry. The Prime Minister has been under scrutiny for days over his more than £100,000 of freebies and gifts over the last Parliament, with another 8,000 plus due to be registered for the free use of a hospitality box at Arsenal's Emirates Stadium. Okay, so with another 8,000 plus due to be registered for the free use of a hospitality box at Arsenal's Emirates Stadium. So that's the cost. So it's £8,000 plus. So it's more than £8,000, which I think is what usually the prices are of these boxes. It's worth pointing out for context, of course, if he was to go into the stands, which I don't think is feasible, to be honest. He would have taken up season ticket holders around him would have obviously perhaps lost their seats because the security detail would have had to be with him. So yeah, I don't know if it's like £8,000 per game. It probably would be, right? I guess it would probably be £8,000 per game, because, like, if you think about how expensive boxes are at the Emirates, that's how expensive they are. It's a lot of money. But that is what they cost. Like, it's I guess that's just the price of them. I'll give you his direct quote as well. He says, "Now I'm Prime Minister, the security advice is that I can't go to the stands, or if I did, you'd have to do so much to the security and it would cost the taxpayer a fortune as a result. I've been offered tickets elsewhere in the ground where it's more secure. We don't have to use the taxpayer money on additional security, and that's why I've taken the decision that I have." Okay, so there's more money that would be spent on security if he was in the stands, but there's money being spent anyway on the existing security, of course, that comes with it. The article continues by saying a large chunk of the free tickets have come from Premier League football clubs, many of whom are lobbying against the introduction of a football regulator, first suggested under a fan-led review by Tracy Crouch. Of course, this is linking into a lot of the FFP drama going on at the moment as well. So there you go. I'll come back to that, and I'll get your thoughts on that in a second. I'll scroll up in the chat box so we can return to the more specific football talk, and then I'll scroll back to your comments on this story as well. Back to the story on kind of chance creation. Ajmal says, do you think the difference in big chances created would stay the same in terms of chances created if City ranks first and we're somewhat 12th? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. So let me just go on to the big chances created. Premier League by club. That's what I want. So Arsenal are currently 5th on 11, and Man City are 4th on 12. Man United are 3rd on 13. Liverpool are joint first with Aston Villa on 14. So 3 more big chances have been created in those 4 games. Now, of course, if this extends across a 38-game season, and let's say it trends, and I wouldn't expect it to, because it's worth bearing in mind that Man City have created 12 big chances against Chelsea, West Ham, Ipswich, and Brentford. They're the 4 games that Man City have played so far this season. So Chelsea, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich. Ipswich and Brentford being at home, West Ham and Chelsea being away. Arsenal's 11 big chances have been created at home against Wolves, away to Aston Villa, at home to Brighton, and away to Spurs. Of course, that Spurs game without both Ødegaard and Declan Rice. So I'm struggling with that one, if you know what I mean, because of course, would it stay the same if the terms of the chance of create a ranked City in certain places? We're not there yet. Arsenal are fifth, City are fourth in terms of the ranking of these chances at the moment. And I do think the context of the games that both teams have played actually provide a little bit more of the situation. Let's go to scroll up a little bit more in the chat. I'm now trying to dodge some of these political stuff at the moment. I will get back to them. I'm not dodging them on purpose for not answering them. I'm just I just want to get back to the football for a brief second. One Song Soup says needs must at this time, but I feel that we can play more effectively on the counter. The midfield could be a bit more direct. Martinelli could be very important in the break for us if he can find his feet. Cass says regarding Saka, he looks knackered from playing so much football. It's going to take its toll. I did not expect it. Unfortunately, he's so important for the team. Arteta can't do it without him. Of course, it's like, could Man City do what they're doing without Haaland right now? I'd argue that they'd struggle. Jackie says, Tom, do you think having started Timber and Saka again in midweek that Arteta does not trust the squad? Also, what do you reckon is the best midfield option for creativity in the midfield? I don't think it's about trust. I just think it's early in the season, and so he feels as though he's able to do that. In terms of the best options for creativity right now, I think it is Trossard, Rice, and Partey. But I do think that against teams like Leicester, I'd be dropping Partey, putting Rice as the 6, and maybe bringing Waneri into the midfield too. I just think we need to add some more attacking verve. And I am more and more convinced that that Rice should be our 6 going forwards. That I think is probably the bigger one for me. That I'm more of a fan of seeing is eventually Rice become that. Now, if Moreno was, of course, fit, that would change. So yeah, I think that's the thing. Right, let's do it. Let's tackle this question, shall we? So the question was, do or / would, if you're a UK citizen, would you care or do you care if the Prime Minister is offered the 2 corporate seats at the Emirates, which we've learned are around, I think, £8,000 in value? It's worth pointing out he's not being given £8,000. He's obviously being given the ticket that is worth upwards of £8,000 a game in terms of the box, which would be for him and his security detail, and I'm sure a member of his family or a close friend, perhaps. At the moment, 75% of you say no. 25% of you say yes. So of the 160 of you that are voting, I imagine there'll be more as this goes on, vote. More of you seem to not care than, or significantly more of you seem to not care than those of you that care. I don't care. is where my head's at. I couldn't give a fig if he does take these tickets. At the end of the day, I think he's Prime Minister. Like, of course, he's going to have a security detail. Of course, he's not going to be able to sit in his usual seat. And of course, if he was to sit in his usual seat, which I think that he would probably want to be sitting in rather than in the box, he's a football fan. He's a very big Arsenal fan. I've actually spoken to the man myself about his Arsenal supporting in an interview last year. He'd rather be in the stands. Like, anyone that knows football inside and out would rather be in those stands. That's just so categorically factual at this stage. That 99% of any real football fans would rather be sitting in the stands with the other fans than in a box. Like, you just would. And I'm convinced that he would too. Rather be in the stands than sitting comfy in an £8,000 a seat, £8,000 a box, or whatever it is, situation there. But the reality of being Prime Minister is that you can't do that. Also, the Prime Minister is a human being. And I remember the story that came out, I think it was like a few months ago, that he turned around and said that he would aim to spend Friday evenings with his family. He wouldn't be working Friday evenings or something, and he would prioritize in situations that he could, with being with his family on Friday evenings. And I remember the media storm in response to that story being absolutely the most overreaction. If you actually have a look at like Arsenal's previous Prime Minister before Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, of course, was Boris Johnson. If you have a look at the record of spending and what happened under Boris Johnson, and you compare the reaction by plenty of the mainstream media of this story about Arsenal tickets compared to the handling of the nation and the things that happened under the previous government. Like, I cannot quite, but actually I can believe it entirely. But how these two things are being covered is hilarious. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous how one is being talked about like is accepting these Arsenal tickets as like this villain, and then you consider the handling of the nation, of course, through the pandemic for it, just as one example of a number of things, and it's mad. Like, so that's just kind of where I'm at with this. Of course, this is just on the ticket thing. There are obviously question marks about some of the things that have happened under the new government that have come in. Of course, I'm just turning the blind down there because it's getting a little bit too bright for me. But in terms of the like the winter fuel tax stuff, like that's obviously something that needs to be discussed in a lot more detail because there's a lot more question marks about that. I'm not exactly like too enamored by that policy at all. And I absolutely I empathize with people who are affected by that in massive detail. But when it comes specifically to this kind of the Arsenal ticket thing, I don't care. I don't care. Jim, with the classic predictable response of this is a football show, not politics. Again, I'm going to raise this point. This is an Arsenal news show, Jim. And this is a story about Arsenal that a lot of people really care about. You don't have to listen to it, Jim. You can turn off your screen. You know, if you just find that little off button, I guarantee you it will work if the batteries are plugged in or charged, that too. So, yeah, but let me get some of your thoughts on this. Burmese says, how much does the Prime Minister earn compared to the average fan? I haven't got a problem with him using a corporate box, but he should pay for it like everyone else does. I think this is the point that a few people are saying for is that he should pay for it. I don't know what his yearly salary is. Keir Starmer yearly salary as Prime Minister. I think it's like 140,000. Maybe it's not as much as that. Okay, it says in 2024, Keir Starmer earned 128,000 from his salaries as an MP and leader of the opposition, and paid 44,000 in income tax in 22-23. I don't know how much he earns as Prime Minister. This is public information. It should be available. You should be able to see it. How much will Keir Starmer earn as Prime Minister? Okay, here we go. According to the Mirror, it says, as Prime Minister, Mr. Starmer will be entitled to a salary of up to £80,000. However, some incumbents have chosen not to claim the full amount. In 2021, Boris Johnson claimed 75,000. Mr. Sunak claims 75,000 from the available 80,000 in 22-23. The five-figure salary comes on top of what Mr. Starmer earns as an MP for North London constituency of Holborn. As of 2024, MPs are entitled to earn £91,000 annually. That means Mr. Sunak's combined salary, should he claim the full amount, will be 172,000. So it seems that it could be as much as 172 grand a year for being Prime Minister. A lot of money. The average UK salary is this is important. The average UK salary for full-time employees was 42,000. Really? That's kind of mad, is it not? Right, so £42,210. That did come from the AI response, so I'm not sure if that's exactly accurate. Forbes. That's the equivalent to an annual pre-tax salary of 35,000. Okay, so let's use the Forbes example from 2024. £35,830, right? I'm not a financial expert. I should point this out. I'm doing this on the fly with my limited E-grade A-level maths. It's what I'm doing. So 35,000, should never have done maths at A-level. It was a terrible, terrible decision. I should have done English. Believe it or not, I'm a journalist, didn't do an English A-level. I know. It shows that you don't necessarily need, for those of you that had your A-level results this year, they are important, but they are not entirely, what's the word? Indicative of what you will end up doing in life. So take that as some encouragement. Okay, so the Prime Minister's salary can be as high as £172,153. So if we do 35, I think this is the right calculation, 35,830 divided by 172,153. That is Is that the right? No, sorry, that's the wrong calculation. 172,153 divided by. I know this is really enthralling stuff for you all, and I'm sure you're really listening intently and really wanting to like the video. So it is 4.5 times, 4.8, sorry, 4.8 roughly, times the average salary. So the average Arsenal ticket price, this is the next calculation, average Arsenal ticket price is per match, because remember the box is roughly £8,000 is what's happening here. So the average price of an Arsenal home ticket is between £85 and £194 based upon what the game is, of course. So based upon what the game is, that's the average price. So halfway between those two is what? We can work out the halfway point by doing 85 plus 194 equals times by, add them together and half them, right? That gives us the halfway point. Yeah. So £139 and 50 pence, let's say, is the average price of an Arsenal home ticket. I think that can't be right, because that, like, a lower Cat C games is something like 30 to 40 quid, and then Cat A games, depending on where you're sitting, is else. Yeah. So upper behind the goal, 29 to 50, upper corner, 46 to 27, upper centre back, 53 to 31. It depends on the lower band and the upper band, doesn't it? So a lower band ticket at Arsenal is roughly, on average, about 40 to 50 pounds. An upper band ticket is roughly 70 to 80 pounds. What would we, on average, say we're happy saying? Shall we say it's like average ticket is about 65 pounds across the stadium? I think that's probably a fair average on a ticket for your average fan. 65 quid for Cat C all the way through to Cat A. So 65 quid. Let's just hypothetically say it's 65 quid, yeah? Right, so last calculation, people. We're nearly there. And I'll tell you what my madness is, my theory on this is. So 8,000 divided by 65 is 123 times. 123 times. So for those people, I guess this is the point of view. For those people that think he should pay for the ticket, what the point is that this is the only ticket that he can use to go and watch Arsenal. Okay? Are we in agreement with that, at least? This is the only if he wants to go and watch Arsenal, this is the only way in which he can do it. Now, I personally feel no matter what job you have, everyone should be entitled to go and watch the Arsenal if they want to. This is the only ticket he is able to go and watch. So for those people that think that he should pay for his own ticket, what you are doing is you're expecting someone whose salary is, for their job, 4.8 times higher than the average UK salary. You're expecting them to pay for a ticket that is 123 times higher than the average Arsenal ticket. I think that's the calculation that I think is relevant. You might tell me that it's not. That's just where I'm at, just doing some quick maths for you. Let's say roughly 100 times, just so in case the average ticket price is lower. So that's where we're kind of at with this. Is it fair for those that think that he should pay for the ticket if he wants to go, and the only ticket he can go in is this £8,000 box situation, for a salary that's 4.8 times higher than the national average UK salary? Is it fair that he has to buy himself, for his job, a ticket that is around or more than 100 times the average price of a Arsenal ticket for a game? That I guess is the question. That's kind of what I'd ask. So a lot of maths there to add some context to it. As I said, I don't really care. It's not going to affect how I vote in any way, I don't think. I don't really care. I think the Storm is a lot higher than it needs to be. I just think it's the reality. Of course, he's going to have this seat. I just think the anger's a little bit kind of overinflated, to be honest. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. Akshat says most people watch illegal streams these days. So yeah, I guess that's an interesting point. So for all the people that say that he should pay for the seat, I wonder how many of those people watch illegal streams of games because they refuse to pay what Sky and TNT are asking for. in terms of games? I guess that's quite a good question, isn't it? Actually, yeah, that's quite an interesting one. So yeah, really interesting. That I quite like that point. That's quite well raised as well. Gooner says, Tom, you're not a pensioner, so of course there will be a backlash. Again, obviously, this links to the winter fuel allowance decision, which again I agree with people. I think it's very questionable. Very questionable decision that they've made. I don't want to go too much into any more politics. This is the most political I think we're ever going to get on the channel with genuine politics, like genuine political stuff. But it's just because it's a direct thing to do with Arsenal that we are discussing it. So if you don't like it, tough. Is what I'd say to that. Mikey says, does he need to go if it's going to bring unnecessary opposition to his wish to establish an independent football authority? It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to bring any kind of issue with the establishment of an independent football authority. I don't know if it'll have any impact on that. I think it's I don't think it's broad. I think this is very specific. I think he's an Arsenal fan. He's always been an Arsenal season ticket holder. He wants to go to games when he can. He's not going to prioritise going to Arsenal over, something really important that happens on the same day, of course. It's worth pointing out. But when he does go, if he can go, I don't have an issue with that being given to him as Prime Minister. I really don't. He's the Prime Minister of the country. I struggle with that. I really do struggle with it. Zoom says, next question, what does watching the Premier League on telly cost in the car? I'm not doing more maths, Zoom. I'm done with maths. I'm over with it. I'm just over it. Not doing any more maths this morning. Let's go to the Saskia Gunnar says the Prime Minister and governments gets very nice pensions and in Canada and in the UK as well. I'm sure they do. Black Magic says during the next January transfer window, would it be worth Arsenal activating Victor Gyökeres' release clause, or would he be cup tied? I think he is cup tied in the Champions League. Maybe I'm not sure if that rule was changed though. I think he might be, but I don't think there is a release clause in January. I think that the release clause is only in the summer for Gyökeres, if I'm not mistaken. I will do a quick Google on that. I think I saw there was something said about it, though, wasn't there? I'm pretty sure I saw something said about the fact that Gyökeres release clause January. No, I'm not seeing it. I don't know where I saw that. I feel like I read it somewhere. Fabrizio Romano, is this actually his account? Yes, it is. Victor Gyökeres is not planning to leave Sporting in January. This was last January. Sporting have have the €100 million release clause. I don't know where I read this. I feel like I read this somewhere, but I can't find it now. So maybe I'm just talking a lot of rubbish. I might be talking a lot of rubbish. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe there is the release clause in January, so I can't remember. But look, if Gyökeres is gradually becoming almost like a no-brainer. If he has the same season he had last season, this season, I think it's an absolute no-brainer for Arsenal to sign him. I really don't. I really don't know if there is a way to argue against the idea of signing him as well. Let's go to John says Waneri to start against Bolton and Leicester. Tom, we have to give him a run. I mean, he's going to start against Bolton. If he doesn't start against Bolton, I am so going to be angry. I'll be really frustrated if he doesn't start against Bolton. Waneri should be starting against Bolton. EK says, I believe the main problem is the chance conversion rate. If we can convert the half chances we create, for instance, Martinelli, we would miss Ødegaard so much. What do you think? Chance conversion, of course, last season in games against Villa, West Ham, Fulham, ended up costing us. And Martinelli this season has not been on it in terms of finishing. But what I would say is that I think the reality is for the team that we can pick on Sunday, Martinelli probably should start. He should start on the left because I think defensively he offers us the most of any of our left wingers. And Trossard, of course, I think will play more centrally with Ødegaard not being there. So, yeah, I just think that I think we just have to be a bit patient in that regard. Saskia says, January window, Tom, because of all the sales, we should be able to spend and not worry about profit and sustainability. We should, yeah, like there should be the ability to spend in January. If indeed the options are there, We should have freedom to spend in January if the right opportunities are available. Of course, this is still in the same year financially as those sales in the summer. So if Arsenal will still, in my view, based upon what we heard in the summer, in January, they should still be using their sustainable approach to this specific season. Next summer, of course, after July, Arsenal's freedom to spend will be really significant, and you should see really significant, like spending more than we spent this season. You never know; it could even be. I don't know. I don't know how free it could be, but I'd be expecting a significant spend next summer if nothing happens in January, based upon what we do. John says we can't spend because we're giving too many free boxes away. Hussein says Partey has looked slow this season, both on and off the ball. Way too many sloppy passes and lack of ball retention, which is completely unlike him. Is there a case for Jorginho to start? There's absolutely a case for Jorginho to start over Partey on Sunday. I don't think that will happen, but I think there's definitely a case for it. Harry says, would you be disappointed with a draw on Sunday? No. Are you mad? Of course I wouldn't. I mean, if Arsenal draw on Sunday, it's a really good result for us. Considering the week that we've had, winning at Spurs, clean sheet away at Atalanta, a draw at City is a really good result. It means they're only still 2 points ahead of us. We've had a trickier start than them. We've got 3 of the biggest away games out of the way, winning 2 of them at Villa and Spurs. I'm sorry, but a draw would be a great result. It'd be a great result on Sunday. I'd rather we won, of course. And some people might go, oh, defeatist attitude, you want to try and win. Of course I want to win, but this is the only game in the entire season where I think if you offered me a draw, I'd take it. Last season I wouldn't have done because the context of when the game was. Toward the end of the season, we absolutely had to what's the word? Win that game, I think. It was a good result, but there was more emphasis on winning that because, of course, the difference between then and the end of the season. At this point of the season, a draw is a great result for Arsenal. A really good result. I mean, a draw last season was still a good result, but there was more emphasis, I think, on Arsenal winning that game at that point last season than there is on Arsenal winning this game at this point. That, I think, is for me, that's the crux of it. Let's scroll up a little bit more. I'm conscious of not going back into the political conversation. I'm trying to find some specific questions. I'm trying to find some specific questions about the game. Harry says that leaves us 3 points behind. No, it doesn't. It leaves us 2 points behind them, Harry. We're 2 points behind Man City. If we draw, we'll still be 2 points behind them. So you're like one result turnaround. And of course, as I said, they've played Chelsea away, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich. We've played Aston Villa away, Spurs away, Brighton, and Wolves. It's very different. So a draw at this point is a good result for Arsenal, without question. Hussein says, I'm taking a draw 10 times out of 10 at City. Don't fall for the narrative that winning the title means we have to beat City away from home, especially at this stage of the season. If you think that the reason we didn't win the league last season was because we only took 4 points from 6 against City, I don't know what to tell you. The reason we didn't win the league last season is because we dropped 6 against Villa and 5 against Fulham. That's why we didn't win the league last season. Taking 4 from 6 against City was not the reason we didn't win the league. Dropping 11 against Aston Villa and Fulham last season was the reason we didn't win the league. So that's what we need to focus on. That's what's important. Harry says, my bad. Your maths today has got my head spinning. I forgive you because that's totally my fault. My maths today has been stretching all avenues of what's possible for me. Right. Let's round things up there. Again, if you've listened to this show and you've been annoyed because we've tackled the whole Keir Starmer story, please don't be. It really doesn't matter. It's an Arsenal story. It's been one of the most talked about stories in English media over the last couple of days. I think it would have been remiss of me to completely ignore it because it's such a specific to Arsenal and it's such an Arsenal-related story. So don't be annoyed about that. If you didn't want to listen to it and you listen to it anyway, that's on you. That's not on me. You don't have to listen to things you don't want to listen to. You can turn off at any point. I encourage you always to take breaks if you think you need to, and I encourage you to turn off whenever you think you want to. So don't blame me for that. Blame yourselves for that. But I'll be back with you, of course, tomorrow morning, bright and early on match day to talk about this massive clash, this massive fixture. And I will tell you now that the Monday reaction show will be in the form of a podcast. It will not be the usual live show. It will be a podcast where I'll be joined by some familiar faces. We'll be going out on 8 a.m. on Monday in reaction to that. And I'll make the reasons for that very clear and why that's happening in probably either tomorrow morning show or in the show itself. So there you go. I'm a real Gooner says, Tom, can I have a free ticket to your show? Absolutely not. No, you can't, because I need to pay for the venue. So no, you can't, mate, have a free ticket to the show. And what I can tell you is that there is, as I said before, if you go onto the Gooner Talk Live website, and find it. It's on Eventbrite if you need to find it for 2025, Gooner Talk Live 2025. It will say the words at the top, few tickets left, because there are literally a few tickets left. So don't miss out. Next February, 20th of Feb, Thursday, at the Old Queen's Heads on the Essex Road in Angel. Join us for a great night of Arsenal chat, banter, interviews, and fan discussions as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. But no, you can't have a free ticket. Sorry. I need to pay for the venue. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. You are all incredibly appreciated. Have a fantastic Saturday. Enjoy yourselves. I've got a day of packing ahead of me, and then a curry in the evening, which I am looking forward to. Really looking forward to that. Do love a curry on a Saturday night. Can't beat it. Anyway, enjoy yourselves. Have a fantastic day. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.